How you doing? Tinkering with Harleys. Today we're going to talk about transmission shift problems. And the one I'm going to talk about is one I've experienced myself several times over the years. You're riding along, you go to upshift, you lift up on your lever, and you get no resistance on that lever. As you bring it back down and let the clutch out, you discover you're in the same gear. It hasn't upshifted. So you try it again and it goes in gear. And you keep on going, don't think too much about it. And it's fine for the rest of the ride. Next time you go out, it does it again. And maybe it does it a couple of more times. And it just starts getting progressively worse. But it always downshifts just fine. And the longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get till eventually it won't shift at all. So the culprit to this is this thing right here. It's a pole shifter. Now what happens with the pole shifter over the course of time, there's a little spring on here which you can see better in the picture. The spring weakens, and also there is a tooth right here. And in the picture you can see the tooth. That wears down. And what it does is this connects to your shift drum. This is your shift drum. It hooks right in here, and you can see these pins. This is what those teeth lock onto. Now the shift drum holds your shift forks. There's 3 of them. 2 go to your main shaft, 1 goes to your counter shaft. And as you shift, that pole shifter rolls back, which in turn rolls this and selects the gear you want to go into. What happens is the spring on the pole shifter gets weak, and rather than grabbing these pins and rolling the drum, it's skipping over the pins. Now it will always downshift fine because there's not as much tension and there's a bigger hook on the downshift side of that arm, and it'll downshift just fine. But it won't upshift. It just slides right over the pins. And like I said, once that happens, you have to address the problem. Where the pole shifter sits is inside the case. The shaft comes out of the case, hooks to your shift arm. The shift arm bolts right to it. The shift arm, in turn, connects to your shift rod. So when you shift, you're moving the shift rod, the shift arm, and the pole shifter. That's what rolls that drum and selects the gears that you want to go into, both up and down. What's happened is, on the pole shifter, it's got a spring. It's not a very heavy spring. It's chintzy. That spring weakens up. And also the upshift tooth, that gets wear on it. After you've done thousands and thousands of shifts, metal on metal wears eventually. I'll get people that'll argue with me about it, that it doesn't have anything to do with it, but it does, and in the picture it will show you the difference. So what happens is that spring wears and that tooth wears. It causes that whole thing to skip, which it's a major problem. Now, the pole shifter itself, once you get to it, is not a big deal to change. Takes about 5 minutes. It's held on with a snap ring. You just pull the snap ring off, pull it out. It has an adjuster in there or a stop. You pull that out and you just pop it out, pop the new one back in. It takes, like I said, 5 minutes. The bad news about it is this is labor intensive to do. This requires a lot of work. And to get down to it, you have to pull your transmission door out with your main shaft and counter shaft in it. And the only 2 things that are left in your transmission is your main drive gear and the pole shifter. They are the first things that go into the transmission and the last thing to come out. So it takes quite a bit of work to get to them. Once you get to it, it's not a big deal to change, but to get to it, it's a big deal. So if you're going to undertake this yourself, you need to have a service manual so you can go step by step, and it requires some special tools on taking things off the bike to get to it. Now here I'm showing you a side-by-side comparison of the pole shifter. One is an old pole shifter and one is a new pole shifter. If you look at the old pole shifter, you'll notice that upshift tooth, which is the one that's inside, it's the closest to where it pivots. You can see wear on that. It's not as defined as the new one. This will also cause to skip over the pins. Now, I know people that have just changed the spring and use the same old pole shifter, and eventually they have to go back in and do it again because that finger that comes down or tooth that comes down, it's worn. And metal on metal, it just wears out. So if you're going to change this, change the whole shifter. Just don't change that spring. You've done all this work to take this thing apart. You don't want to do it again. When I did mine, I didn't go with a stock Harley replacement. I've gone with them before, but I decided to do something different. I went and I got a Baker pole shifter and a Baker shift drum. And the comparison between the two, now the Baker pole shifter and drum are already in my bike. I can't show you them. But the Baker pole shifter is far heavier than the Harley stock pole shifter. It's far more substantial. The spring is heavier. The retention spring on it is much, much heavier. And it's a far sturdier piece. Now, when I put this together, my bike shifts better than it has ever shifted before. Now, I'm not giving Baker a plug. That's not my intention here. I'm telling you what I found. But my bike never shifted like this before until I put the Baker setup in, and now it shifts just as smooth as can be. And while you have all that stuff out of there, sitting on the bench, inspect your gears, inspect your shafts. If you see chipped teeth, cracked teeth, you get a lot of metal shavings out of the bottom of your transmission case, you got a problem. And while it's all apart, now's the time to address it because it takes so much work to get to it. You don't want to have to do this twice. While you got it apart, fix the problem while you got to. Now, if you take it to a shop, it's going to be expensive to have done. My guess is anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to replace it, depending on where you live and what shop you take it to. Now, I do all my own work. I don't take my bikes out to anybody. I won't let them touch them. So we do all our own work. So if anybody's having this problem where your shifter is just sliding and it's not grabbing when you're upshifting, that's what the problem is. It's the pole shifter. It's not locking onto that drum and rolling that drum to shift your transmission. So that's what you need to address. So I hope this video helps somebody. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, by all means subscribe. And thank you for watching. Be safe out there.